Hello everyone and welcome to a conclusion video of the World Blitz Championship 2021. We're going to show two games in this video. First, we're going to show Maxime Vachier-Lagrave versus Magnus Carlsen, and then we're going to show another one, but we'll get to that. And it was very interesting because during the final round, 6 people were tied for first place, and the Magnus was half a point behind them. Other games that were fighting for first place some of them were very interesting, but for example, Duda also had a shot of reaching the top, but he agreed to a draw against Nishigiri only after 6 moves were played. I don't know why. Maybe it's the money prize, because as I understand that there are like 40 money prizes throughout the event, so maybe he was going for one of those, as maybe it was not possible for him to win first place, but it's hard to say. All in all, I was not very happy to see that. Then Duda, who is playing a great tournament, won a game against Vladislav Artemiev, which propelled him all the way to the top. Alireza defeated Levon, which also propelled him to the top. We're going to discuss the standings a little bit later, but this is the game that we have to see in order to fully understand the ending. So Maxime, with the white pieces, opens with e4. We have e5 by Magnus, knight f3, knight to c6, and now bishop to b5. Going for the Ruy Lopez, we have a6, Morphy's defense, bishop to a4, and now knight to f6. We have castles and bishop to e7, so a nice closed Ruy Lopez. We have rook to e1 and b5 now, chasing away the bishop, bishop to b3, and now Magnus castles. And here the question always must be asked, is white ready to challenge black to a martial attack? And if Maxime plays c3 here, no doubt Magnus will go for the martial attack, but of course he doesn't. He plays the anti-martial variation with a4, bishop to b7, and now d3. We have d6, so this is all very, very standard stuff, just putting pieces to their rightful squares. Rook to e8, preparing bishop to f8, knight to f1, and now h6. We have c3 and bishop to f8. So this has been seen many, many times in top-level chess. Knight to e3 and knight to e7 now. Magnus remaneuvering the knight all the way to g6. We have h3 and knight to g6. Now we have knight to h2, and now there is a game where knight to f4 was played, but here Magnus strikes in the center with the d5, and it is now as a move 15 that we have a completely new game. So what do you do here? Well, it's a 3-minute blitz game. Okay, 3 plus 2, but still a 3-minute blitz game, and you don't have time to, discover new ground, really. So you capture the pawn. E captures on d5, knight captures on d5, and now queen f3. A very nice move by Maxime. The knight can't move, well, just about anywhere, because, you are gonna lose that f7 pawn. So knight to h4, Magnus attacks the queen on f3, and now queen to e4. Queen to g4 is a safer idea, but Maxime puts his queen on a very awkward e4 square, and Magnus immediately goes after the knight on e3. Knight captures on e3, grabs a piece, and is threatening to pick up that g2 pawn. Maxime has to go into it because, well, that's why he played queen e4, but queen captures on b7, knight captures on b2, although you could also throw in a nice rook to b8, but okay, knight captures on g2. We have rook to e4, now preparing rook to g4 to pick up the knight and then the other knight, and now queen captures on d3 by Magnus. Now preparing queen captures on h3, and this is a complete mess of a position. Rook to g4, now threatening to capture the knight, and now queen captures on h3 by Magnus. B captures on a4 is always in the position. Although it looks like you're just grabbing a pawn, you're really not. You're asking white, what do you do? Because I'm threatening rook b8, and you're going to lose that bishop on b3. And it's not just a piece, it's an incredible attacker here, completely slicing the board in half. But okay, Magnus played queen captures on h3, and now he overlooked a beautiful move that Maxime also overlooked. I have to remind everyone, this is a 3-minute blitz game. Here Maxime played rook to g3. He attacked the queen, but there is one move you have to play before that, and that's queen to d5. And now, how do you defend f7? It's just not possible. If you defend it with rook to e7 or rook to e6, then you lose the rook on a8. Obviously, you can't play that. And the problem is, if king h7, queen captures on f7, and it's game over. There's no defense. Queen to g7 will be checkmate. The rook covers the g6 square, and you can't really move the bishop because then queen captures on g7 is checkmate. So Of course, Maxime isn't really banking on Magnus missing something like this, so he doesn't look for it. So rook to g3, we have queen back to f5. Now the pawn is nicely defended, so queen d5 no longer serves any purpose. And now rook captures on g2. I think Maxime was just focused on grabbing that knight on g2, and he didn't want to, waste any time on looking for other things. Knight captures on g2, although b captures on a4 is always possible, but okay. Knight captures, we have queen captures on g2, and now rook 8 to d8. So now Magnus has a rook for a light square bishop and the knight, and if he can put those rooks to good use, it's gonna be great. If not, then well, Maxime will have a lot to fight with, and you can play rook d1. Of course, the bishop covers that, so you have to find some other way to attack the black king. You're kind of hoping to get this rook to d6 to g6 in, but it's not gonna be easy. We have knight to g4, and now king to h8. Already there's a threat of knight captures on h6 check, and you're gonna lose the queen. So king h8, Magnus has to play this. Now a captures on b5, a captures, and the knight to e3 now attacks the queen, queen to h5, and now knight to f1. So you have this knight to g3 move to defend any of those rook moves. And Magnus advances the e4 pawn. We have knight to g3 attacking the queen, putting pressure on the pawn, queen to g6, and now bishop to e3. So Maxime putting his pieces on optimal squares, as you can see, and bishop to d6. Very nicely placed bishop. We have knight to e2 now, offering a queen trade, and Magnus declines the queen trade. We have queen to h5, but again, it's impossible to bring the rook into the attack because the bishops cover e6 and g5, and you can play rook to e6 to go g6, and you can play rook to e5 to go g5, as the bishops are just doing a wonderful job here. So knight back to g3 attacks the queen, and here, if Magnus doesn't want to repeat, he has to do something. So we have a bishop captures on g3, f captures on g3, and now rook to d3. At least Magnus gets to activate his rooks this way. Queen to f2, and now we have f5. Magnus starts the attack. Bishop to c2 chases away the rook, rook to d6, and now king to g2, preparing rook to h1 to get the queen away from such a lovely square. We have rook e to d8, doubling up on the d file, and now rook to h1. We have queen to g6, and now bishop to f4. Those bishops are just beautiful, attacking while also defending, not allowing rook to d2. So rook d5, and now queen to e2. We have c5 by Magnus, as he knows that Maxime wants to play b3 and c4, so he's preparing c4 himself. b3 and now c4. Our good friend, the engine, says queen to c6 can be very, very strong because, well, the king is on g2. But okay, c4, we have b captures on c4, b captures, and now rook to f1. You want to maybe play rook to f2, so you don't have to worry about this bishop always guarding the d2 square. It's just very, very safe. And here Magnus played queen to f6, and it's a really weird move to play. With queen to c6, Magnus still keeps the edge, aligns the queen with the king on this diagonal, and is ready to do some damage. But here he played queen to f6, which is very odd. He's attacking the c3 pawn, but he's blundering the c4 pawn, and as it turns out, it's a very important pawn. So Maxime captures it. We have queen to b6, and now comes bishop to b3. So what do you do here? Here, rook to c5 by Magnus. Again, Magnus had the opportunity of playing e3. It's just a beautiful move where white is out of good options, really. Best for white is just to give up the queen for two rooks, and that's it. Try and play this game because it is just not a good position. Rook to d2 is coming, and well, this e3 move is just beautiful. It's well. It's a shame for black that it didn't happen. So rook to c5, Magnus goes after the queen, but now queen to f7, and now Magnus is already in big trouble. Here Magnus played rook captures on c3. He can't really afford to go after this pawn. He has to play queen to f6, but okay, rook captures on c3 was played, and now he misses something incredible. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Maxime while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that mate is inevitable. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, Maxime just played bishop to e5, and now there is really nothing that Magnus can do here. Let me just check. I'm not sure at what position exactly did Magnus resign in, but I don't want to, misinform you guys. So let me just check this real quickly. Okay, yeah. So after this bishop to e5 move, Magnus played rook to d2 check, even though there's really no better move, even if you try something like rook captures on g3, because you can't defend against mate, and even rook to g8 is impossible to guard this g7 pawn, because we just capture it, queen captures with checkmate, because our bishop is still on b3. So here you might go for something like this, simply to get the bishop away from this diagonal and then trade queens, but you are down too much material. For example, captures, and queen captures on f7 and rook captures. You're down 2 bishops. Of course, it's completely winning. So instead, Magnus played rook to d2 check, Maxime played king to h1, and it was in this position on move 47 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. It's impossible to defend against checkmate, and there is simply no move you can make here to even make it a little bit interesting. It's just completely lost for him. So Maxime is propelled all the way to the top with 15 points, and that means that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Jan-Krzysztof, Duda, and Alireza Firouzja are tied for first place. But as the rules state, only 2 players will play the playoffs, and that means that the players with the best additional criteria will face each other. And Alireza dropped out, so Alireza will not be playing. And now we will see the game that won first place, and that is, of course, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave versus Jan-Krzysztof Duda. Here, let's just load Duda's game. And this is the third Blitz game. So the rules of the tie breaks are we play Blitz games 3+2 until someone wins. Of course, first we play 1 game and game 2, and only then, if it's a draw, then we play whoever wins first. If we can play until tomorrow, until someone wins. Those are the rules. It's not a new rule. I've been told that it has been used before by FIDE, so as the games are very, very short, it's possible to enforce them and endure them. But okay, let's check it out. Third game, first 2 games ended in a draw. Maxime opens with e4, and we're gonna have another very nice Ruy Lopez, a knight f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5, same as in the game against Magnus. a6, Morphy's defense, bishop a4, knight f6, castles, bishop to e7, and now not going for rook to e1 like he did against Magnus. Here he goes for d3. We have b5, bishop to b3, d6, a3, and castles. So this is all very well-known stuff. Knight to c3, and now knight to b8, another standard maneuver. You are preparing to strike against the center with c5, and you're going to shift this knight over to some better squares. So here we have bishop to d2, and now knight b to d7. We have a4, and Duda grabs more space with b4, chases away the knight d5, and now a5. And here there is a game where bishop to e3 was played, but here Maxime plays c3, and it is now, as of move 13, that we have a completely new game. So Duda captures it, we have bishop captures on c3, and now knight to c5, going after the bishop here, but this is how Maxime saves it. Knight captures on f6, bishop captures, and bishop to d5. Attacks the rook, we have rook to a7, and now queen to c2. Developing the queen, still defending our d3 pawn. We have bishop to g4, now threatening to ruin black's king side a little bit, but Maxime finds d4. An incredibly strong move, because if you go after the knight now, we simply capture on c5, and your bishop is now hanging, so you'd have to move the bishop, and then we can play something like b4, and if a captures, bishop captures, white's position is excellent. You can't capture, otherwise bishop captures, attacks both of the rooks, and you already have a passed a pawn that you're ready to push. So white would enjoy this position very much. So instead, e captures on d4 was played, knight captures on d4, and bishop back to d7, keeping an eye on that knight to c6 move. So knight to b5, attacking the rook, and now bishop captures on b5. We have a captures, and now bishop captures on c3, queen captures on c3, and now a4. So this is how Duda will defend his pawn, but that also means that the knight and rook are somewhat stuck here defending this pawn for the foreseeable future. So here we have queen to e3. You could also try e5 because black can never capture, but it doesn't really force anything. So Maxime holds off with the e5 push. We have queen to e3, aligning the queen with the rook on a7. So Duda defends it. We have queen to b8, and now bishop to c6, defending the b5 pawn. And it's not much, but Maxime has a very firm grip on the position. The queen and rook here are completely useless on the queen side, and the bishop also covers the e8 square, so rook to e8 is not happening. It's hard to find good pieces, good squares for Duda's pieces. So here, queen to b6, but now rook 8 to d1. We have rook to b8, and now we have e5. Finally, Maxime opens up the position, and the problem with capturing the pawn is that Duda will keep a passive position for pretty much the rest of the game. If you capture this, queen captures, what do you play? You can't really do all that much. Rook covers d8, bishop covers e8, the queen, rook, nothing can get into the game. And for example, if knight to e6, we're going to play rook to d7, and it's just very, very bad for black. So instead, Duda tries to give up a pawn to, you know, get something out of the position. He plays knight to e6, gives up the d6 pawn, and now Maxime says, all right, I will trade queens and go for this endgame. So queen captures, rook captures, we have pawn captures, and rook captures on d6. And now a3. We have to exchange this pawn to activate our rook. So b captures, we have rook captures on a3, and now g3, creating some breathing room for the king, and now we will activate our rook. And, well, it's pretty much an equal position, except for Maxime's passed pawn on b5. So here we have g6. Duda also creates some breathing room for the king, rook to d7. Now, it's you also have to be careful, because the f7 pawn is also somewhat weak. So rook to b8, and now we have rook to b1, preparing to push our pawn, and you can't just block it. If you block it, we're going to play rook b7, and still we're going to push our pawn. So, so Maxime goes rook to c3, Duda goes rook to c3, and now rook to a1, preparing the other rook lift, and then it's going to be very difficult to defend the 7th rank. So knight to d8, we are now ready to defend, bishop to d5, now putting more pressure on f7, and here it's not easy to defend. There's really no good way to stop rook to a7, so maybe rook c to c8 gives some counterplay for black, but not a lot. Duda played king to f8, but this just makes it much easier for Maxime. He goes rook 8 to a7, rook to d3. Now prevents bishop captures because we will first capture the rook, but now king to g2. Maxime starts bringing the king into the game. King g7, we have bishop to c4 now, attacking the rook and also offering a rook trade. So rook captures, and now king f6. We have b6, pushing the passed pawn with a tactic, because if rook captures knight. So knight to a6, and now b7, and this is now a very nicely advanced passed pawn. g5 by Duda, now bishop captures on e6. Maxime is confident that he will win this rook and pawn endgame. You can't capture with the pawn, because then we capture the h7 pawn, so king captures on e6, and now rook c7, and you can't go after the rook because we will capture on f7. So h5 is played, we have king to f3, that's not a king. King to f3, Maxime starts bringing his king into the game, and now f5, and of course h4. To players like Maxime and Duda, this is a very well-known endgame, and of course they both know how to win it. So g captures on h4, there's really nothing to be done here, so this wasn't played. If king d6, we just go after the king side pawns, and you are lost. So instead, after h4, king to d6 was played, going after the rook, but now rook to h7. We have a trade here, captures, king to e5, but now king e3. The opposition is there, there's nothing for you to do. Rook to d8 was played, and well, here Duda, Maxime just captured the h5 pawn, and it was in this position on move 49 that Jan-Krzysztof Duda resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. He's down 2 pawns, and that of course is easily winning, you know, on many different ways. That's basically how Maxime became the World Blitz Champion 2021. So he had a brutal round, final round against Magnus Carlsen. He defeated Magnus, and then he went into tiebreaks against Duda, and then only in the third game of the Blitz did he emerge victorious. And a lot of people were like, okay, this isn't fair because Duda doesn't get to have the white pieces in the fourth game, but tiebreaks are never fair, and they will always favor one of the players. So we have to decide that the champion somehow. Chess still hasn't figured out how to do this fairly and properly. But yeah, congratulations to Maxime on winning first place. Duda wins second place, and Alireza Firuja wins third place. So I don't forget, these are the final standings of the World Blitz Championship 2021. So you can see MVL first place, Jan-Krzysztof Duda second, Alireza third, Daniil Dubov fourth. So as you can see, if he didn't drew his game against Giri so quickly, maybe he would have won, and maybe it would have been a little bit better, but obviously not by a lot. We have Aronyan, Mamedyarov, Artemiev, Sindarov, Fedosev, Oparin Grigori, Haik Martirosyan, Magnus Carlsen only in 12th place, as I'm told that this is Carlsen's worst world and rapid world championship that he ever played. Martin Kravitz in 13, Alexander Grishuk, Mikhal Kobalia, Anish Giri, Kirill Alexeyenko, Vidit Gujarati, Nihal Sarin, Alexei Sarana, Ralf Mamedov, Drev Alexei, Giga Kuparadze, Arjun Ergeishi, and Yani Pomnishi in 25th place. So Blitz was not kind to our world champion and our world chess championship challenger. We'll see what happens in the next one, but this one was very enjoyable, and you can see that a lot of new players are emerging, as you can see here. For example, Yavokir Sindarov of Uzbekistan did incredible work here in the Blitz section, and Nodirbek also did very impressive work in the rapid section. So Uzbekistan is really creating some amazing chess players. Those are the standings. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and this short coverage of the World Blitz and Rapid Championship. And like I said, really hope you guys enjoyed it. For those of you who still haven't, feel free to send me photos or videos of you teaching someone else how to play chess. If you guys are interested in being in the Chess Brings People Together video 2022, the email is in the description below. The first one, not the second one, as a lot of people are sending it to the wrong one. So use the right one. That's it. I would like to thank George Julian, Higlau Labun, Christian Hogel, Drew Watkins, Michael Calbera, and John Henry for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and Happy New Year, everyone.